Hey folks, Adam Livingston here, better known as the Bitcoin Wizard, broadcasting for Swan Bitcoin. If you've ever felt like your diploma came with a ball and chain instead of a key to prosperity, listen up. We're about to torch the myth that student loans are good debt and show why stacking sats crushes chasing credentials. Now, I'm not saying that college is never worth it for certain individuals. I will just be presenting the math and the reality of how the fiat system has influenced college tuition and student loans. If you get a STEM degree for free due to scholarships, that's great. I would just caution against taking out $250,000 in student loans for a bachelor's degree in underwater basket weaving. But remember, this is not financial advice, this is financial entertainment. So to set the stakes, America's student loan ledger has now hit $1.81 trillion. That is T as in Titanic, big enough to buy every NFL team 5 times over. The weight is currently strapped to 42.5 million graduates and dropouts. Think the entire populations of California and Florida combined, and they're all owing Sally Mae their lunch money. The average balance is $41,600, up an eye-popping 593% since 2004. Your parents' tuition hike was a speed bump. Today's is Mount Everest. So why is this so insane? Because fiat credit has clearly turned universities into drunk sailors. An infinite bar tab, endless amenities, and zero accountability. Graduates get the hangover, the creditors are getting the yacht. But there is good news: Bitcoin exists. Hard-capped money that cannot be printed by bureaucrats or borrowed by campus dorm slide installers. Stick around and I will show you how a Swan dollar cost average plan beats a lifetime of loan deferment. So picture an ivy-covered campus in 1990. Tuition sits politely at the dinner table with general consumer prices, both indexed at 100. Then Congress handed universities a bottomless pitcher of federally guaranteed loans. Wall Street then spiked the punch bowl with securitization, and the Federal Reserve keeps refilling everyone's glass at 0%. So if you fast forward to 2025, the tuition index is blasting off at 542, while everyday CPI barely crawls to 215. So to be clear, that is a 442% moonshot versus 115% for everything else you buy. That is the textbook Cantillon Effect in cap and gown form. Unlimited lending literally means that schools never have to say that's too expensive. If you want a lazy river pool winding through your dorm complex, you simply swipe the Department of Education's credit card. If you need an army of assistants to the assistant deans for the student experience, you can issue another tranche of Parent Plus loans. Every marginal dollar of fresh credit travels straight from the Treasury's printing press to university balance sheets before it ever cycles through the real economy. So the sticker prices rise first, and wages try and obviously failed to catch up later. After the 2008 financial crisis, the Fed locked interest rates near zero for a decade, turning college financing into a no-credit check carnival. Families figured 2% money is practically free, so they borrowed with abandon, blind to the compounding principle that would greet them when rates normalized. And then universities responded with the only way a monopolist with price-insensitive customers can. They hired more administrators than there are tenured professors and built rock climbing walls beside gourmet vegan dining halls, all while the core instructional quality flatlined. So the cost spiral that we have seen in education is not evidence of better education, it's proof that when money loses its anchor, prices lose their gravity. Under a hard cap monetary system like Bitcoin, tuition would have to clear against real savings, not endless fiat IOUs forcing schools to compete on actual educational value instead of jacuzzi-equipped dorms. Until then, the credit tap stays wide open and tuition inflation will keep outrunning paychecks like a sprinter on Red Bull. So every single financial bubble ends with buyers questioning the bill of goods that they were sold. And higher ed is now staring straight into that moment of truth. From the outside, the brochure still glitters, leafy quads, Latin mottos, glossy rankings. But inside the spreadsheet, a harder line item shows up. Nearly a quarter of all bachelor's degree programs leave graduates poorer over a lifetime than if they had skipped college entirely and gone straight to work. Liberal arts and consumer science majors are posting net values deep in the red. And even once reliable mid-tier business degrees are slipping towards zero after interest and taxes clip away the salary premium. The math is brutal but simple. The loan repayment siphons off the first decade earnings just when compounding should begin. So current college graduates are missing the snowball effect that their parents enjoyed. Meanwhile, credential inflation is flooding the job market right now. Where a high school diploma once sufficed and a bachelor's commanded respect, employers are now demanding masters or multiple internships for the same entry-level pay. Underemployment is soaring. Baristas with honors theses recite latte orders instead of Latin conjugations. They're wondering why their GPA isn't translating into purchasing power. And Washington's quiet admission of failure has arrived in the form of program-level loan caps. Bureaucrats finally conceded that some majors can't justify unlimited debt, so the amounts that you can borrow will soon hinge on expected wages. It's triage for a system that treated all degrees as equal while knowing full well that early childhood education could never amortize a six-figure loan at 5+%. The policy tweak may slow the bleeding, but it doesn't fix the core pathology. Fiat credit turned credentials into a commodity whose price and value divorced decades ago. So contrast that with Bitcoin's proof-of-work ethos. In open-source communities, you are what you can produce, not what parchment you frame on the wall. Developers with no formal computer science degrees are landing six-figure gigs because their GitHub commits speak louder than their transcripts. Designers showcase portfolios on-chain, content creators monetize audiences directly, and entrepreneurs bootstrap and sats instead of seed rounds. When money cannot be conjured at will, capital seeks real productivity, not ornamental letters after a name. In the fiat paradigm, the credential becomes a liability. In the hard money paradigm, demonstrable skill is the only credential that matters. When tuition is financed by scarce savings instead of elastic credit, universities must prove their value every semester, or they watch students vote with their wallet and stack sats instead. Student loan repayment has become a nationwide game of musical chairs, except the music stopped 3 years ago and borrowers are frozen, waiting to see who will get stuck without a seat. Before the pandemic pause, roughly 1 in 10 graduates defaulted within 3 years of entering repayment, and at for-profit colleges, it was about 1 in 6. Then Washington slammed the repayment button to off, which magically drove the published default rate to 0 even as balances kept accruing interest like mold behind wallpaper. For 3.5 years, borrowers lived in Schrodinger's debt, technically delinquent, officially current, psychologically suspended. So now the moratorium has lifted and reality is resurfacing. The median monthly bill sits just under $300, harmless at first glance but layered on top of rent, higher groceries, and 8% credit card APRs. It's morphing into an anchor that drags the disposable income below the waterline. Worse, many borrowers signed up for income-driven repayment, a gentle-sounding plan whose math often produces negative amortization, which means the payments cover less than the interest, so the principal grows even as borrowers dutifully pay. They are trapped in debt quicksand. You can struggle all you like, but you're just gonna sink slower. Servicers are quietly anticipating a default wave once the grace periods expire. Early call center data is showing that hold times are spiking and hardship forbearance requests are piling up. Imagine millions of 30-somethings facing a choice between grocery inflation and Sally Mae. Then recognizing that defaults hurt their credit scores, they limit their housing options, and raise auto loan rates, feeding back into the broader economy like a brake tapped on every consumer purchase. Bitcoin is standing as the photographic negative of this system. There is no fiat-style forbearance because there's no central counterparty to extend mercy. Instead, you self-custody in assets that never compounds against you. In a world where money doesn't metastasize through interest credits, young adults could allocate that $300 monthly cash flow to building equity, first in sats, then later in homes or businesses, rather than servicing a liability that may outlive their enthusiasm for the degree that it financed. So this is the lesson I want to teach you today. Fiat debt traps time, but Bitcoin frees your time. Repayment stress isn't just about dollars, it's about forfeiting your future optionality on the altar of yesterday's inflated tuition. Student debt is also not just a line item on the balance sheet, it is an existential speed bump that flattens ambitions and warps life trajectories. More than half of borrowers report persistent anxiety directly tied to their loans, and mental health hotlines are quietly noting that student debt anguish is now a top 5 trigger for suicidal ideation. Debt stalks them in the grocery aisles, on first dates, and during 3 a.m. insomnia loops whispering compound interest math. Those psychological scars translate into delayed milestones that once defined adulthood. Surveys show 7 in 10 indebted non-home buyers blame their loans for keeping them out of the housing market. When they finally do buy, they spend nearly 40% less on the home because the bank counts their monthly payment as an anchor on affordability. Marriage follows the exact same script. Each extra $1,000 of student debt lops nearly 2 percentage points off the odds of tying the knot in one's 20s. And then family formation often slips a full decade as couples wait for balance statements to shrink. Meanwhile, the opportunity cost is compounding invisibly. With $300 a month diverted to debt service, 79% of borrowers struggle to save. 75% never invest, and 1/3 postpone having children altogether. This financial paralysis is metastasizing into demographic decline. Fewer babies, older first-time parents, and a shrinking tax base propping up the expanding entitlement system. Fiat debt begets fiat demographic doom. Bitcoin is the psychological jailbreak to all of this. When your savings are sitting in a hard-capped asset that you own outright, the mental context shifts from scarcity to sovereignty. The same $300 that once serviced a loan now builds an escape hatch, growing quietly in cold storage, uncorrelated to bureaucratic interest rate roulette. The relief that you can feel is not just financial, it is existential. Your anxiety recedes when your money stops bleeding value. And the timeline for your dreams, your home, your spouse, your children, your business, it snaps back toward the present, not some future that you can't even imagine. So the bottom line is that fiat-funded credentials mortgage your future and extract a psychological toll that compounds faster than any APR. Hard money flips the narrative, turning each monthly outflow into an upward spiral of optionality, and this is the power of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the structural antidote to this entire problem. For students, the shift feels like gravity returning after years in a debt float. Saving in Bitcoin trains patience because gains arrive through appreciation, not leverage. A teenager who stacks weekend job sats sees compound energy working for her, not against her like interest on a Stafford loan. For institutions, the incentives pivot from cosmetic amenities to demonstrable career outcomes, because customers must part with scarce capital earned through sweat and hash, not signature loans. With Swan Bitcoin, you can automate that monthly stack. It places every subscriber on the hard-earned money side of the ledger. The same $300 that pay yesterday's tuition can finance tomorrow's sovereignty. One choice feeds the broken system, the other starves it while growing your personal balance sheet. That is the structural antidote in motion. Look at the chart on the screen here. 2 lines leave the starting gate at exactly the same $300 pace. One climbs and one sinks. The blue track is a 10-year student loan. Every month you shovel cash against a mound of principal and interest, watching the balance shrink in slow, dispiriting inches. The orange track is the very same cash flow rerouted through a Swan automated dollar cost average into Bitcoin. Instead of extinguishing debt, each contribution adds fresh fuel to an asset with a built built-in scarcity throttle. Keep in mind this graph is made from a 30% compound annual growth rate for Bitcoin when it's been a 57% since 2013. And this line of the value of Bitcoin going up is only based on a 20% Bitcoin price appreciation, when in reality it has had a 57% compound annual growth rate over the last decade. Even when you're extremely conservative, this is the power of compounding Bitcoin. So this visual is just making an unarguable point. Identical dollars can either chain you to yesterday's inflated credential or compound you into tomorrow's sovereignty. One path ends in relief that you no longer owe, the other ends in exhilaration that you actually own. So the closing question that I have for you is blunt and liberating. Will your next $300 erase a few flakes of fiat rust, or will it forge another link in a hard money future? Stack sats, not student loan statements, and let Swan do the heavy lifting. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Adam Livingston. I am the Bitcoin Wizard. Have a terrific day. Class dismissed.